Over the last year, some of my favorite games, and probably some of yours, have been called anomalies. Games that aren't standard, that break the mold, buck the trends, and often conserve some aspects from games from many years ago. And a lot of them have also been very successful. And as there have been more of these games, especially within AAA and AA, there's been more and more discourse around them. The content machine, creating controversy for almost every single one of them. And some people have even brought up the point that maybe if there are so many of these games, we shouldn't call them anomalies anymore. Which, by the way, we should. We're gonna get into that later. But to me, it's really surprising, because games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Lies of P and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Stellar Blade, Black Myth Wukong, and yes, Space Marine 2 and Astro Bot, not to mention a bunch of other smaller games, things like Unicorn Overlord, Shin Megami Tensei 5. They've all been standouts in my opinion, and a lot of people agree. But this led me down a rabbit hole. Why are people calling some of these games anomalies when it's not like they're completely changing the way we make games? They're simply doing things in a way that's similar to the olden days. So what do they have in common that's made them successful? What makes them resonate with people? What makes us want to talk about them and leads to that controversy? Is there a trend here that's good for games? And I'm gonna answer all of that, but the most important thing at the top is that a lot of the praise that goes for these games comes from independent reviewers and people championing them as great examples, when a lot of the negative feelings towards them come from developers and publishers. Yes, developers. Do you guys remember that Baldur's Gate 3 had other developers saying that it was a bad influence on games because it set unreasonable expectations for what an RPG could be, and that we very immediately asked them, why? Aren't you guys both competing for $60? Isn't this just the best wins? And then they kind of mumbled some words and crawled back. And you guys should not forget that for the last 10 years, we've had major publishers telling us that single-player games are dead, that your favorite genre of game isn't viable anymore, that these big companies are no longer sustainable without microtransactions. What do you mean that there's all of these games that are successful without them? Those don't exist, you made them up. And so I kept digging. And as you might expect, this is a slightly big topic and there are some things you might disagree with, but I think it's important to talk about it. The more that we drill down into the topic, the more that we understand what's going on, the more we can better communicate why we need more of these games. Because yes, your favorite game might be an anomaly, but in the near future, it shouldn't be. So welcome, I'm Mug. This is the really cool transition that I haven't thought of yet, but I'm sure there's gonna be something awesome here. Now there's a couple of important things to mention. Just because we're going to be talking about AA and AAA a lot in this video doesn't mean that there aren't tons of great games that also do all of these things and have been for a while. Mostly from the indie scene. This isn't about how everything is terrible, it's just a fact that while we have more and more of these anomalies, there's still a small percentage of the games that come out. They also account for a very small amount of the money that moves through video games, and the part that scares me the most is that they're a very small amount of the projects that different studios pursue. Most studios would rather take the opportunity cost and finance a project that could hit it big. Some live service, battle royale, PvE shooters, something like that, a survival game. But the fact is that a lot of people are chasing the money, and not just sustainable money like these games are going to prove, but instead, the maximum potential money. So with that out of the way, I have tried to distill the essence of these anomalies down to one expression that I have found myself using more and more. They're video game-ass video games. And this is the biggest part of the video. We're going to deal with stuff like controversies later, because the whole idea of a video game-ass video game to me is really important. What makes us feel like a game is like the old ones, like the good ones? Is it just nostalgia? Is it rose-tinted glasses? Or is it something deeper? Spoilers, it is something deeper. It has to do with the intention that the developers have when they begin to make a game. Or I guess you could also consider the mandates that they receive from the high lords of the houses of EA and Activision and things like that. So I have personally boiled it down to 5 rules that a game needs to follow to be a video game-ass video game. You don't always have to follow the 5 rules like to the letter and stuff, but I think this is an easy way to identify these games, and you can add more or tell me if I'm wrong in the comments below. Number 1, it's a complete video game. The state of the game and its 1.0 release, the day it launches, the version that's pressed on a disc without internet access, was intended to be a complete experience. That doesn't mean that they can't patch the game, add DLC, add expansions, whatever you want, but it was never unfinished. These are just add-ons, not finishing the job. And yes, this does immediately disqualify a lot of multiplayer games and live service games. We'll talk about them later because it's not like they're terrible because they don't have this. What matters most is that in the last years, with internet becoming an expectation, everybody probably has internet, a lot of games have started to trend towards being unfinished. Be that releasing in broken states or with unfinished elements, be that assets, stories, voice acting missing, all sorts of stuff, including some pretty high-profile games from big publishers that just come out missing their endings, or promising to include things that should be there later on. I believe it was the uncle of French philosopher Spiderman who said, "With great power comes great responsibility." And the thing with that is, yes, the internet is great. We can patch games, we can catch mistakes, and as games become more complicated, as we have especially PC gaming with so many different hardware configurations, things are going to slip by, and it's great that we can come out and fix them. But the truth is that the intention of a lot of developers has become, well, because we have this tool, we will fix it later. Just push it out the door. Get it into people's hands, make some money, build an install base. Who cares if the end of our 20-hour campaign isn't finished? Nobody's gonna reach it within the first month and we'll patch it in later. And a lot of the games on the list that I've presented here were finished on release. They had everything that they needed to, at least the most important things, so that you could still have that experience that, if you have been playing games for a while, you still remember, of popping in a game, or I guess installing it day one, and having that full experience, knowing that even though you're one of the first people to play it and marathon through it and really want to enjoy it, instead of this constant doubt that we live with now of, well, I'll just wait and buy it cheaper in 2 years when they fixed everything that was wrong. Number 2, the business plan for the game is to make its money by being sold. The game, not anything else. And this ties in with that idea of delivering a full, complete experience, a full product. And if you don't think about it too much, you might reach the conclusion that most games with an upfront price follow this business model. They want to make the majority of their money by doing this, giving you a quality experience, and because people buy it, they have enough money to make more things. But then you have to think about something like Diablo 4, which is a full price release that doesn't intend to make its money through selling the game. That's just charging you to join the party. And then they're going to charge you for every single drink, even the water. When a game's business model from the start, be that because it's free to play or has a lower entry price, or in the worst cases, is incredibly expensive upfront anyways, and then the intention is to have incredibly expensive microtransactions, DLCs, season passes, and all of these sorts of live service attachments to it, that doesn't communicate to us, the players, a premium video game-ass video game. And you also have to remember that while this normally is associated with multiplayer games, there's plenty of single-player games that still try to nickel and dime you with microtransactions down the line. There's games like GTA 6 that, I mean, yes, it's Rockstar, they're in like their own galaxy, but GTA 6 cannot make its money back just by selling the game, unless they increase the price. That's a topic for another video. But with the budget for GTA 6, they have to develop the game with the idea that there's going to be an online component where they're going to sell microtransactions, where they're going to sell cosmetics, DLC, season passes, battle passes, all sorts of things, because otherwise it would just lose money. And that has to be considered from day one in the design of the game. And while there's another very large conversation about budgets and expectations in the market and how you plan out your game from the start, what I'm talking about here is undeniable. Games that are intended from day one to make their money from not the sale of the game are made very differently. Number 3, the game is concerned with the value that it's offering its customers. It actually cares, either in quantity or in quality, that people are going to finish the experience, and this will come in later, but that they can finish it whenever they want. You can drop the game halfway through, but still feel like the money you spent on it was worth it. And there's many ways that they increase that value that are very smart, and a lot of them have now become monetized. Do you guys remember that Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth locked its New Game Plus behind the Deluxe Edition? Things like New Game Plus, or different secrets, or costumes, and things like that always add replayability, which in the worst case are a really easy way of offering customers a ton of value without too much added effort from the part of the developer. And we've seen a lot of these things disappear or become extras over time. And by extras, I mean you pay extra. And to be honest, I think this is one of the reasons that people gravitate towards RPGs, because a lot of them have still had to obey the rules of an RPG tends to be pretty meaty and massive and have a lot of good content in it. It has 20 hours of cutscenes and 60 hours of gameplay and different systems and mechanics that you can play around with and have natural replay value. And if you don't really offer that, the RPG crowd really doesn't like it. But with examples of things like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, you start to see even that become eroded. Number 4. The reason for the game existing is because it's fucking cool, man. And cool doesn't mean follow the rule of cool, or the game needs to be really fun, or innovative, or change the industry. But because the people making it believed that their idea was awesome, and they wanted to share it with other people. This is a big one. And the clearest example for me of this disappearing is that when we look at bigger companies especially, they're not taking their favorite games and getting inspiration from them and then saying, well, how can we make this different? How could we make this better? How can we make this our own? And instead they're saying, if this thing worked and made money, we could probably do more or less the same thing and also make money. There was no authentic passion behind the inception of it. So many games these days feel like they're corporate mandates where somebody said, we need to compete in the live service space. What is there? Okay, there's PvP, there's PvE, there's a alternative PvP where it's not about violence, there's battle royale, there's extraction. Let's try and get a project for each one of those. And then they throw that against the wall and they throw a bunch of people at it, and those people then have to find passion. They have to find innovation. They have to work within the rules that others have set so that they fit the trends of the market to attempt to make something special. And you will never convince me that that's a good way of working. You're not supposed to start something and then justify its existence later. You need to start from a place of passion where you're thinking, this is going to be awesome. We're going to disrupt the market. We're going to make the best game of this type. And then if you fail on the way, you at least did something different, something cool, man. Rumbleverse, this is a weird tangent. Sorry, this is not in the script, but Rumbleverse was really cool. Rumbleverse was an awesome idea for a battle royale, and sure, for a million different reasons it didn't take off and it completely failed and they had to shut it down. But you could play that game and know immediately that the people making it wanted to make it. So even if it wasn't the best in other things, at least that vibe was really important to it. Never thought I'd talk about Rumbleverse in a video. So this is, again, a complicated topic, but I hope I'm expressing it correctly. Games shouldn't exist made in a lab to fit into a corner of the market. They should exist because they're good ideas. And number 5, and deceptively the most important in my opinion, is that a video game as video game is so good that the only reason you need to play it again is because it's good. This is a practice that I'm really afraid of because as I keep thinking more and more about Assassin's Creed Infinite, if you want to know more about that, got a video up on the channel, the idea that a single-player game would need battle passes or constant updates and different timed events to get people to come back and play them is really scary. Sometimes we've seen this done in very good faith and without problems. There's a great game and people love it, but you move away from it because that's normal. That's just how it works. Some people will stay, some people will go. And maybe some of these limited time events or a little update here or there exist just so people come back and play it and have a good time. It's not there to try and convince you to spend more money. But when even single player games start actively implementing different systems to keep people playing, to bring you back, to instill FOMO, they're normally doing it because they have an extra monetization option, and the basic psychology of things says that the more time you spend on something, the easier it is for you to justify spending money on that. And in the worst case, it feels like an extension of all of the progression systems, of the attention retaining systems that we've seen in video games over the years. Imagine if something like Assassin's Creed Shadows were so filled with bloat, so filled with extra stuff that you don't really want to do, but The game, over the course of its first month, keeps adding little battle passes and extra missions so that you do the bloat and get some extra cosmetics while flashing the store in front of you so that you reach the end of the game, and then by the time you reach it, it implements a endgame grind that is absolute garbage, but hey, you get cosmetics or something. It is a nightmare hellscape, and I think this is influencing design more and more. Great games that fit the video game label, are ones where you can feel comfortable stopping. You can feel comfortable saying, I had enough of this, I enjoyed it, and for one reason or another, I don't feel motivated to reach the end. And there is a purity in having the people who made it believe that the version of the game they made is what they wanted to, and if it didn't resonate with you, that's fine. And that has to do with things like that business model. They already made the money, you got enough out of it, and everybody moves on. But as the idea that we need players playing our games, no matter if they're single player or multiplayer, we need them to continue. We need audience retention. As video game systems, mechanics, and stories become TikTok, so that you can never look away and they force you to keep on them and then spend money on them, this industry would go to hell. It would become unrecognizable to me, and I don't think that will ever happen, but the idea that it could is scary, and these games do not give a shit about it. They're so concerned with being excellent and being what they are, they don't care if you stop, and I would like more games to do that. Now, just to double clarify, if a game doesn't follow this, that doesn't mean it's bad. Obviously, a live service multiplayer game cannot fit many of these things. The entire idea behind them is to create communities and change the experience, to have something in continuity where belonging to it and seeing it change is exciting for the people who play it, be that an MMO or an Overwatch, it doesn't matter. And because the nature of them, they make their money off of microtransactions, but they have a whole separate list of rules that determines if they are excellent or not. Things like, are they pay to win is a really easy one. One of my favorite parts about video games is that it's a space filled with potential and diversity. You can make so many different types of games, and within experimenting and trying new things, we can find amazing experiences. So not every game needs to be like this, but we need more games that are like this. The good news is that we're seeing more and more games, specifically from newer studios, that are following this. A lot of games still exist this way that a lot of people just don't look at. But also within that, let's say, slightly less public level of games, the ones that not everybody talks about, that fit more into their niches, there's more and more games that come out announcing their season pass. When you would normally say, hey, this game isn't out yet, it's a weird gamble to begin with, the feeling I get when you tell me that this game has a season pass isn't that this game is done and complete and a full experience, and instead that you were already thinking about making money from it later. I don't think it's a coincidence that From Software or something like Game Science with Black Myth Wukong didn't sell you the DLC and season pass up front when buying the deluxe edition of the game. And that matters because it communicates to us as gamers, I'm getting the full package. And that's what I care about. I'm more willing to spend my money on that. And then if there is DLC later on, they'll just release it and charge me for it. And isn't that just nice? Just simple? And this is why we should keep talking about it, so that more people recognize this system, understand the things that make them good, and we reward them for it. And the great thing about seeing big studios find big success in the mainstream with these sorts of games, to see breakout hits that follow these rules, is that it proves to other people, to big publishers that have resources, that if done right, you're going to have a sustainable business. The reason that we keep seeing more and more multiplayer live services come out is because it's worth having 6 of them fail. If one of them finds success, you're going to make all of that money back. That is just how video games work today. But I believe that what these companies should be doing for a better health of the industry and for a better health of the products that we get in the end is to try and diversify a bit more. Don't put 6 live services into production. Put a lot of resources into 2 live services, and it's a much more stable business model, a much lesser gamble to just produce video games that are good and have those be sustainable. Can they fail? Yes, but their failure is not nearly as catastrophic as a live service can be. And equally, their successes will never lead to Fortnite money, because what even leads to Fortnite money? What even is it? You can't even imagine it. It's too much. But you can make great experiences, great video game-ass video games that will make their money back, earn you some extra money, and slowly fill up that pile for you to invest that in other things or to just exist as a business that makes great games. But it seems like that has now become frowned upon. If you're making video games, why just make something that you love? Why make something that you think is interesting, important, fun, that could change the way we view certain design elements or whatever? No. You should be aiming to make the most money. And you know what makes money? Live services and microtransactions. So it's better to fail doing that than to succeed at anything else. And I think that perception is changing, and it should continue to change even more. At this point, we're heading back to the ways things used to be many years ago. Studios like Game Science or Larian are taking the success of their games, which have made them a ton of money, and then expanding their companies, adding more employees and more resources, or making multiple projects at the same time, as is the case with Larian. And then eventually they're going to be doing 3 different games at the same time, and because in an ideal world, they're all going to be video game-ass video games, they will all make money to some degree or another and allow that company to continue growing and make better and better games in a sustainable fashion until they decide to invest it all into 2 different live services that both flop, and then they're in the hole and they believe that their only way out of it is to make more live services. Oh no. It's cyclical. But hopefully that doesn't happen this time, and if it does, there's always going to be people like you and me reminding them that there are other ways to do this, and there's other customers that they're not catering to. Okay, that was a lot of stuff, but now there's the second part of this video, and this one, ironically enough, is going to be a little controversial. I do think it's important to mention some stuff. So this is going to be a slightly difficult conversation to navigate, because I believe that it's very coincidental that so many of these games do end up in different controversies. No matter if they're small, like Lies of P being called a Souls clone, or then we have things like the censorship regarding Stellar Blade and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, or the much worse examples that we see with something like Black Myth Wukong being actively targeted by mainstream media and weaponizing people into outrage in order to take down this game, or the case with Space Marine 2 and the controversy surrounding the YouTube comment by the CEO, which I think is the latest controversy to be blown way out of proportion, since it's just a person expressing their opinion. Sure, you can interpret it in many different ways, but what a coincidence that so many people like to interpret it in the worst way possible. And I don't like reporting on things that aren't facts, so I'm not going to really get into it. Now trust me, if there was something to report on, if there was something that I could connect the dots and tell you 100% with certainty that traditional media and large publishers are doing what they can to make these anomalies less common, to bog them down in controversy, I would report that. But for now, I think we just have to chalk it up to the fact that big games that are a talking point because they do things differently are going to lead to people wanting to talk about them and make articles and make videos on them. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you view the conversations around these games or why they are so popular or why so many people want to talk about them. The fact is that a lot of the good about these games is being thrown out in exchange for that controversy. And a lot of the more interesting questions that come from these games are being ignored in favor of that controversy. And I mean, they're just taking advantage of the fact that we live in pretty divisive times. I don't think that one is a controversial statement to say, but that makes me sad, because at least within the gaming community, if there's one thing that we should all be able to rally around, it's good games. So allow me then to take the time to break down the real appeal of these games and the wider problem that exists within them. And when it comes to the appeal of them, I think it's pretty clear that we have reached a point in video games where so much of the bigger space, the things that occupy the most billboards, the things that are calling for your attention, that have the bigger marketing budgets, are so exhausting in their copy-paste design, in their trend-chasing nature, in the amount of things that they keep pushing onto us, slowly infecting us into that retention system, that more and more people every day are longing for a time when video games were simpler. And I think that's very clear when you start thinking about historically video game anomalies. Before, these things used to be games that completely transformed what video games were forever. Your Super Mario 64s, your Zelda Ocarina of Times, your Metal Gear Solids, your World of Warcrafts. Games that solidly mark a before and an after in what video games even are. But now, our anomalies are, this is just a good platformer, or this is a CRPG that's really well made with today's technology. This is just a solid action and adventure game. Our anomalies today are games that just accomplish the bare minimum, the standards that we had 20 years ago. And I personally don't view that as gaming going downhill, that now we have to grab onto any rock that we can, and instead, just the natural course correction. We've gone way too far in one direction, and we have to start correcting course. And this is why it's so important to call them anomalies. Because even though it's bittersweet looking at what they are compared to before, that is the natural progression path. Because we can start with games doing things as we used to, and then after that we can get back on track with games doing things that are absolutely revolutionary in every space, be that the indie, the AA, or the AAA. And I'm human. I sometimes make mistakes, and I don't have a pulse on everything on the market. I might be completely wrong, but I spend a lot of time looking at sales data and analytics and user reports and average playtimes and things like that because I like to understand where the market is headed. And I feel pretty confident in saying that we've reached this point now where people just find it attractive for a video game to treat them with respect, to respect their time, their money, and to give them an experience that is what a customer deserves to receive, as all of those rules before describe. And I'll keep saying that that doesn't mean that's the only thing that video games need to do, but we have lost so much of that. These games that are concerning themselves primarily with being a good game and offering that customer a good experience are some of the most important turning points within this industry. Each one, be they big or small, be they mainstream and causing controversy, or just quietly existing and finding their fan base, are all stepping stones onto a road where we shout that this is something that belongs in video games just as much, and that we need more of it. And I find it sad that within so much noise and division that we see within video games today, we aren't talking more about this. Because I truly believe it's something that benefits everyone. And you might have your own definitions of it. I don't think that a video game always needs to be fun, because I love Fear and Hunger 1 and 2, and I would never describe those games as fun. But they are incredibly interesting experiences that I think are worth having if, you got the stomach and the patience for it. And I think video games can be experimental. I love games that play around with ARGs, or games that their whole purpose is to kind of just subvert expectations. I wouldn't necessarily recommend them as like a great fun video game, but I think that they have their place. And I also don't think that the only thing a game should concern itself with is being the fun game that you play. I just think that right now we're so lacking in that it seems like the most important part. Because games can be used to tell incredible stories and things that transcend just the basic part of playing a video game. But I don't think we can really get back to that until the more general philosophy and the intention behind the creation of games gets at least a little bit back onto the main track. And for me, that main track are those bullet points I said before. Games should start with the idea of being a great game. And then we can bolt whatever we want onto them. You can make all sorts of games and take advantage of how free and how expressive video games can be. And if you chose wrong and did something that nobody likes, the market will just respond in kind, and that's fine. But I do feel like recently a lot of the core tenets that we need to have in the industry are being disrespected over and over again. There are games that are being designed first as products. There are games that are being designed first as a way to pander to a specific audience, doesn't matter which. And sometimes it feels like less and less do we have games that are actually just trying to be good video games. And when we do get them, especially if they're big, it feels like there are armies of people telling you that you should hate them, or that you should love them, or that if you love them, you're a bad person or something. And I'm very aware that it doesn't matter how much I try with this channel to keep nuance, to keep the grays in between the black and white alive, that that's not really what's popular. But there's something that bothers me deep inside when things that are good, things that I just want to celebrate, that I just want to talk about how they're great and good and more of it should exist, get all tangled up in weird conversations like that seem to want to manipulate your perception of it and the market. And I'm very happy that we currently live in a world where the market is speaking louder than ever. Your wallet matters more than ever. And we can see these games, despite that noise, rise through it and become great successes that hopefully people will start to imitate across the entire gaming landscape in the years to come. And I truly believe, as I've said before, that video games are in the middle of a healing process, because sometimes you do go so far off track that you need to go back a bit to find yourself again, and that's fine. I just know that I'm excited to play more games that are video game-ass video game. I'm excited to keep saying in my reviews that this game has big PS2 energy, and I mean that in the best way possible, man. And I hope that with this video, I put into words what that feeling is, what those games used to be, and the things that we need to remember and that we need to reward in video games today. Because I'm gonna dare to finish this video with a different phrase. Your favorite video games right now might be an anomaly, but in the near future, they won't be. I've been Mug, and thank you, truly, for watching. It means so much. The channel recently passed 40,000 subscribers. I really never imagined that that was, like, possible. But I take that as a serious responsibility that you've placed your trust in me, and I have to return that trust with excellent videos. Oh no, I forgot to say like and subscribe earlier in the video this time. I'm dumb. I'll figure it out. But if you enjoyed this video, if it was worth your time, hit the like button. It helps the channel grow. It helps this video reach more people. And if you want to see more from me and my opinions on all sorts of things, subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I guess now we're aiming for 50,000, and that would be crazy. It might take a while, but that's fine. If you're unsure about subscribing, maybe check out the channel first, because I do news, reviews, essays, retrospectives are one of my favorite things to do. The only consistent thing aside from video games here is that it's me and my opinions and being as authentic as I possibly can with you. A very extra special thanks to my patrons up on the $1 patron wall. It's called that way because there's only one tier, $1, but they directly support everything that I do here on the channel, and I'm very thankful for that. If you want to join, more info in the description below. But really, thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a good time. I hope you're feeling good about games. Go out there and enjoy some games, and I'll see you again very soon.